Black billionaire poses as broke security guard. Falls for a woman who has no idea who he is. The sun had barely broken through the morning fog as the city of Chicago buzzed to life. Downtown, where sleek suits rushed past food trucks and street musicians played under rusted train bridges, the imposing glass tower of Franklin Enterprises stood like a sentinel over the city. On the outside, it was all polish and steel. But inside, it was a pressure cooker. Marcus Reed stood at the side entrance, adjusting the oversized security guard uniform that hung slightly loose on his muscular frame. The polyester shirt scratched at his skin, and the badge pinned over his heart read M. Richards, a name that wasn't his. Not really. Marcus was a billionaire, owner of several tech companies, a former combat engineer turned venture capitalist, and now undercover as a broke temp security guard. Why? Because when you have everything, sometimes the truth gets cloudy. And Marcus was tired of being surrounded by yes men. He wanted realness. Authenticity. And maybe, if he was lucky, something more. As he scanned employee badges at the side entrance, he kept his head low, shades on, and played the role. No one looked twice at a black man in a faded guard uniform, not even the people whose jobs he technically owned. And that was the point. "Hey, new guy," came a voice behind him. Marcus turned. A woman, late 20s, curly hair pulled into a bun, cardigan over a vintage t-shirt that read, "Justice Never Sleeps." She had a coffee in one hand and a book in the other. Her eyes, hazel and sharp, met his with curiosity, not judgment. "You good?" she asked. "You look like you've been standing here since last night." "I'm all right," Marcus replied, lowering his shades slightly. "Just figuring out how this scanner works." "They didn't give me a proper orientation." She chuckled. "Yeah, they don't care much about orientation here. They kind of just throw you in and expect you to swim." Marcus smiled. There was something about her, calm but fierce. He wanted to know more. "I'm Ava Monroe," she said, extending a hand. "Legal department. Technically a paralegal, but they work us like full-blown attorneys." He shook her hand, noting the calluses on her palm. "Marcus, just Marcus, first day." "You'll survive," she said with a wink. "And if anyone gives you trouble, send them my way. I scare HR." She disappeared into the building with a grin, leaving Marcus standing in the morning breeze, stunned. She didn't know who he was, and she was the first person in months who had spoken to him without either fear or fake admiration. Later that afternoon, Marcus sat alone in the break room. Most guards had already clocked out or were too busy watching sports on their phones. He took out a sandwich wrapped in foil. He made it himself to keep the act convincing. Ava walked in, clearly not expecting company. "Hey," she said, noticing him. "Mind if I sit?" He motioned to the seat across. "Sure." She unwrapped a salad and poked at it with a plastic fork. "You ever feel like you're the only sane person in a room full of nonsense?" "More often than I'd like to admit," he replied. "What's bothering you?" She hesitated. "I found out something today. Legal's covering for a department head who's been taking kickbacks. I brought it up. They told me to drop it." Marcus sat up straighter. "That's serious." "I know." "But they don't care. They said unless I have solid proof, I should stop asking questions. Like integrity is optional." "What are you going to do?" She looked him dead in the eye. "I'm going to get that proof." Marcus felt something shift in him, not just admiration, respect. This woman had guts. That night he drove back to his penthouse, changed out of his uniform, and stepped onto the balcony. The city lights blinked below like nervous eyes. He couldn't stop thinking about Ava, her laugh, her courage, her refusal to look away from injustice. He picked up his phone and called his assistant. Logan, I want everything on a department head at Franklin Enterprises. Name's Henry Boswell. Get me financials, emails, any pending investigations. There was a pause. Sir, may I ask why? You're supposed to be off-grid. I met someone, Marcus said. And she's about to go to war with a machine she doesn't know I built. The next day, Ava found a file in her locker. Anonymous sender. Inside were documents, transaction records, private emails, damning enough to blow the whole thing wide open. There was no note, no signature. Just one post-it that read, "Use wisely." She looked around the hallway, half expecting someone to be watching, but all she saw was Marcus, sweeping near the elevator with earbuds in. He looked up, gave her a small nod, then returned to his work. She clutched the folder to her chest. Something about that man didn't add up, but for the first time in a long while she didn't feel alone. And that changed everything. The following days felt like walking a tightrope for Ava Monroe. She had the documents, smoking gun-level evidence that would not only expose Henry Boswell, but also shake the very foundation of Franklin Enterprises. Every time she looked at the man swaggering through the halls like he owned the building, a chill went down her spine. And yet, she couldn't act too fast. One wrong move, and she could lose everything. She'd already made digital copies, kept backups on flash drives stashed in 3 separate locations. She even mailed one to her sister in Portland just in case. But none of that kept the anxiety at bay. At the same time, she couldn't stop thinking about Marcus. There was something in the way he listened, the way he watched people like he was constantly learning from them. Unlike most folks in the building, he didn't walk with arrogance or desperation. There was patience in him, poise, like a man playing the long game. One afternoon, she found herself standing outside the side entrance again, sipping a bitter coffee and wondering why she hadn't just gone to the press already. "You always look this serious?" came Marcus's voice from her left. She smirked. "Only on Tuesdays." He nodded toward her coffee. "That bad, huh?" "Worse. It's like drinking regret with a hint of cardboard." "You know," Marcus said, pulling out a crumpled paper bag from his jacket, "there's a taco truck down on Wabash that serves breakfast tacos all day. Way better than corporate sludge." She raised an eyebrow. "You offering, Marcus? Only if you promise not to report me to HR for excessive kindness." They laughed, and for a brief moment, Ava forgot the storm brewing above their heads. They walked the few blocks together. The taco truck was old, red, and smelled like heaven. She watched Marcus order with a confidence that didn't match his uniform. It was too smooth. Too practiced. "You from around here?" she asked. "Born in Bronzeville." "Moved around a lot after college. You?" "Came up from Gary, Indiana. Single mom. She worked 2 jobs so I could go to law school. I owe her everything." Marcus tilted his head. "And now you're risking that everything to do what's right?" "I guess I am," she replied, eyes narrowing. "What would you do?" "I'd burn it all down if it meant stopping corruption," he said, and there was a flicker of something sharp in his tone. Not anger, purpose. Ava stared at him. "You speak like a man who's done that before." Marcus just took a bite of his taco. That night, Ava returned to the office after hours. She needed access to the internal filing server, something she couldn't do during the day without raising flags. The halls were dark except for the glow of security lights. She slipped into her cubicle, powered on her computer, and plugged in a secure USB. As she navigated to the encrypted folder, she didn't notice the shadow standing outside the door. Henry Boswell had been watching. Earlier that week, someone from IT had flagged Ava's activity. Accessing unusually high-level documents, using admin credentials she shouldn't have. He ignored it at first, until he caught a glimpse of a file labeled Kickback Audit 2021 in the access logs. Now, standing silently behind a pillar, he watched her pull up spreadsheets that could end his career. A floor above, Marcus sat in the dark of the security control room, quietly observing the feed. Every camera was on his screen. He leaned forward when he saw Ava alone at her desk. Then he caught the movement. A figure in a suit creeping closer, staying out of frame. His stomach dropped. "Logan," Marcus said into a hidden earpiece, connected to a secure line. "Yes, sir?" "Redirect all exterior feeds. Put building security on a loop for the next 10 minutes. I'm going in." In a matter of seconds, Marcus was out of the control room and moving through the stairwell like a ghost. Ava froze as she heard a footstep behind her. "You working late, sweetheart?" came Henry's slick, cold voice. She spun around, trying to act calm. "I could ask you the same." Henry stepped forward, his presence overwhelming. "You know, most people don't snoop where they don't belong. It's not good for their careers." "I'm just trying to be thorough," she said, sliding the USB out slowly. "You're trying to get fired," he growled, snatching the USB from her hand. He held it up, smirking. "Let's see what secrets you've been digging up." "You don't want to do that," came a voice from the doorway. Henry turned. Marcus stood there, out of breath but composed. No more joking tone, no more disguise. He stepped into the room like he owned it. "And who the hell are you?" Henry barked. "Just a security guard," Marcus said, slowly walking toward them. "But the kind that records everything, including you threatening a whistleblower." "You're bluffing," Henry snapped. Marcus pulled a phone from his pocket and tapped the screen. Henry's own voice echoed from the speaker. "You're trying to get fired." Henry's face turned pale. Ava stared at Marcus, stunned. How did you record that?" "I don't just sweep hallways," he said with a wink. "I watch everything." Henry lunged for the phone, but Marcus sidestepped, grabbing him by the wrist and twisting just enough to make him drop the USB. It clattered to the floor near Ava's feet. "I'd think twice before making that move again," Marcus said, his voice low and dangerous. Henry staggered back, humiliated. "You have no idea who you're messing with." Marcus stepped closer, eyes locked. "Actually, I do, and pretty soon, the board of directors will too." As Henry fled the room, Ava looked at Marcus like he was someone entirely new. "You're not just a security guard," she whispered. "No," he admitted finally. "But I had my reasons." She picked up the USB, clutching it tightly. "You just saved my life." Marcus met her gaze. "And you might have just saved mine." The next morning, the air at Franklin Enterprises felt thick with unspoken tension. Ava arrived early, still shaken by the night before. She hadn't slept much. Her thoughts kept circling around Marcus, the USB, and Henry's face when he realized he'd been caught on tape. She walked into the building, head high but heart racing. She wasn't sure what Marcus's game was yet, but she couldn't deny that he had saved her. The real question was, why? As she passed through the marble lobby, Marcus stood by the security desk like nothing had happened. Same uniform, same calm expression. Only this time he gave her a look, subtle but knowing. "Morning, Ms. Monroe," he said like they were just acquaintances. "Morning," she replied, holding his gaze for a second too long. She took the elevator up to the 16th floor, where the legal team's offices were. The moment she stepped off, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Miss Monroe," a voice said smoothly, "I suggest you tread carefully today." Click. She stared at her phone, chest tightening. Was that a threat? A warning? Inside her office, she closed the door and locked it. Her inbox was flooded with emails, half of them marked urgent. Meetings had been rearranged. The quarterly review she was supposed to attend had been pushed. Something was shifting, and not in her favor. She opened her laptop and began sorting through the files again, but her mind drifted. Marcus. That voice on the phone. And most of all, what was she going to do with the recording? A knock on the door pulled her out of her thoughts. It was Marcus. She unlocked the door and let him in. "I figured you'd be on edge," he said, glancing around. "Mind if I sit?" She motioned toward the chair across from her desk. "At this point, I'm just surprised you're still on payroll." "Henry's arrogant, but he's not reckless. If he fires me now, he looks guilty. I bought us time." Ava leaned back. Bought us time for what? Marcus hesitated, then leaned forward. "I think it's time I come clean about who I really am." She blinked. "I'm listening." "My name is Marcus DeWitt. My family owns DeWitt Industries. We control several tech and logistics firms around the country. I'm the acting CEO. Ava laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Right. And I'm Beyoncé." "I'm serious," he said quietly. "I went undercover here for a reason. I've had my eye on Franklin Enterprises for months. There are layers of fraud here deeper than you've seen." She stared at him, searching for any sign he was lying. "Then why pretend to be a security guard?" "Because people talk differently when they think you're nobody," he said. "They slip. They brag. I needed to see the rot from the inside." She crossed her arms. "You expect me to believe all this? That you're some billionaire moonlighting in my lobby?" Marcus stood and pulled out his phone. He opened his banking app and tilted the screen toward her. The balance made her breath catch. "I don't flaunt it because that's not who I am," he said, "and right now we're on the same team." Ava sat in stunned silence. Then she whispered, "So what's your plan?" "We bring this to the board. Together. But we need more than just the USB. We need real-time evidence of corruption, proof they can't deny. And we can't make a move until we have it all." She hesitated. "And what happens to you when they find out who you are?" "They won't." "Not until I'm ready. And when they do, I'll be sitting at the head of the table, not outside their building." Later that afternoon, Ava was called into an unexpected meeting with Henry and two board members, Ms. Calloway and Mr. Denton. The moment she walked into the room, she knew it was a trap. "Ms. Monroe," Henry began, fake concern dripping from his voice. "We've received word you may have accessed confidential files not related to your position." She stayed calm. "I accessed files directly tied to my role as compliance counsel, and I did so under the rights of internal audit." Miss Calloway folded her hands. "Even so, those actions should have gone through proper channels." Henry jumped in. "It's not a disciplinary hearing, of course. We're just concerned." She looked him straight in the eye. "Are you concerned about protocol or about what I might have found?" For a second, the mask slipped. His jaw tensed. The board members exchanged glances. Ava stood. "If that's all, I have work to do." Back in her office, she found a note on her desk. No name, just one sentence written in block letters. "They're watching you. Be careful who you trust." She turned the paper over. Blank. No fingerprints, nothing. Paranoia clawed at her. What if Marcus wasn't who he said he was? What if she was a pawn in a much bigger game? She needed air. She left the building and walked 3 blocks without realizing where she was going, until she saw him. Marcus. Leaning against a black SUV parked just off 8th Street. You followed me? She asked. No, he said softly. I was waiting. For what? For you to decide if you're ready to really take this thing down. Ava swallowed hard. If we do this, she said, there's no turning back. Marcus nodded. That's the only way I know how to move. She exhaled, slow and deep. Then she said the words that would change everything. Let's burn it down. Ava sat at the back booth of the quiet diner Marcus had chosen, watching him scribble on a napkin as if mapping out a war plan. Outside, the rain fell in slow, steady sheets, dimming the afternoon light. Her coffee had gone cold, untouched since he started explaining the web of fraud tying Franklin Enterprises to off-the-book shell accounts and crooked real estate deals. Let me get this straight, she said finally, pinching the bridge of her nose. The company's been funneling investor money through dummy non-profits to buy land under fake names, then flipping it to themselves for triple the price? Marcus looked up. That's just the tip of it. They're using pension funds, federal grants, even veteran housing subsidies. It's been going on for years. Ava stared at him. And nobody caught it? Nobody looked, Marcus replied. And the few who did? Quietly forced out or paid off. The files you found, that USB, it's part of a broader picture. But it's not enough. He handed her a new folder. Inside were internal communications he'd intercepted from the server room, a place only security staff like him could access without raising eyebrows. Emails, invoices, even travel receipts that placed executives at meetings they'd denied attending under oath. Where did you even learn to do this? Ava asked. My father taught me. Before he passed, he ran our companies like a hawk. He said power doesn't protect you. It just gives you more to lose. She closed the folder slowly, her eyes lingering on a name that kept appearing. William Kessler, Franklin's CFO. He's the link. All these wires, all these sign-offs, they trace back to him. And Henry's his puppet, Marcus added. Which means we expose Kessler, the rest comes crashing down. But if we go straight to the board, they'll cover it up, Ava said. They'll throw a junior executive under the bus and say the system failed. Marcus leaned in. That's why we don't just go to the board. We go public. Ava's breath hitched. You're serious? One story to the right reporter. A leak big enough to force an investigation before they can bury the evidence. But we need something undeniable. Something visual. Just then, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it. It was a message from an unknown number. Leave now, if you want to keep your job. Her stomach flipped. She looked around the diner. Was someone watching? She hadn't told anyone where she was. No one except... She turned to Marcus. You didn't send that? He looked genuinely puzzled. Of course not. Ava stood up. We're compromised. Someone's tracking us. We need to move. They paid the check and slipped into Marcus's SUV. As they drove, Ava's thoughts spun. This was no longer about saving her career. It was survival. Back at her apartment, she packed a small bag, laptop, hard drive, spare clothes. As she zipped it shut, she caught a reflection in the mirror. Herself, tired, angry, but no longer scared. Marcus called from the other room. There's someone you need to meet. They drove to a quiet neighborhood in Brooklyn. Marcus parked in front of a brownstone with boarded windows and no lights. Inside, they descended to a dimly lit basement where a woman in her 40s sat at a desk cluttered with monitors and wires. This is Cam, Marcus said. Former NSA. Now she freelances, ethically. Cam raised a brow. You must be the lawyer. Cute. You're way in over your head, Ava smirked. So I've been told. Cam tapped a few keys. I've tapped into Franklin's internal Zooms and conference calls. You want dirt? You'll have it in 12 hours. Ava exhaled. Make it 8. I think they're planning something tonight. As Cam got to work, Marcus and Ava stepped into the hallway. Why are you really doing this? She asked him. He hesitated. Because power in the wrong hands ruins lives, and because I don't want to be one of those people who had the resources to help and chose not to. Ava studied him. There was something in his voice, something real and wounded. A part of him he rarely showed. You already are helping, she said quietly. Just don't disappear on me. He held her gaze. I won't. Later that night, a new email hit Ava's inbox. The subject line read, Urgent board meeting, 8 a.m. tomorrow. It wasn't from HR. It wasn't even from a verified account, but it had every board member copied. The trap was being set. And they had one night to flip the script. By the time the sun came up, Ava hadn't slept a wink. She sat on the edge of her couch, hands clenched tight, eyes fixed on the flickering screen of her laptop. The videos Cam had retrieved were damning. Hours of closed-door meetings between Franklin executives, including Henry and Kessler, discussing payouts, phony contracts, and even a few veiled threats toward whistleblowers. But the final video hit different. It was a recorded call, barely a week old. In it, Kessler spoke with a man named Judge Carter, someone Ava had once clerked under during law school. She's getting too close, Kessler said. If she opens that file, we're done. Franklin can't afford that. Do whatever it takes. The judge responded calmly. Say the word, and I'll make sure she's discredited, maybe even disbarred. Ava sat frozen. This wasn't just corporate fraud. It had bled into the legal system. Judges. Politicians, all tangled in a network she once believed in. Her faith in justice had always been fragile. Now it felt shattered. Marcus entered the room holding 2 cups of black coffee. You okay? He asked. Ava showed him the video. He didn't speak. He just stood there, watching it twice before finally muttering, They really were going to destroy you. No, Ava said, voice low. They still are. But we've got this, Marcus replied. Cam's already uploaded encrypted backups. If they shut you down, the story still gets out. Ava looked at him. If? Marcus gave a tight smile. Let me be optimistic for once. They drove to the board meeting under a heavy gray sky. The building was glass and steel, sterile and towering, just like the people inside. At the front desk, the receptionist looked up as Ava and Marcus approached. I'm here for the emergency board session, Ava said, sliding her ID forward. The woman raised an eyebrow. Your name isn't on the list. It wouldn't be, Ava replied, calm. But check the boardroom feed. They're expecting me. A few tense seconds passed. Then, reluctantly, she was buzzed through. Inside the boardroom, 12 directors sat in leather chairs, murmuring, shifting in discomfort as Ava entered. Henry sat at the head of the table, lips curled in a smile far too thin to be warm. Ava, he said smoothly, this meeting is confidential. You shouldn't be here. She dropped a flash drive on the table. You might want to listen to what I've got to say before calling security. Kessler's eyes twitched as he recognized the drive. I've spent weeks collecting evidence of illegal financial activity, obstruction of justice, and collusion with federal officials, Ava continued. And unless every single member of this board wants their faces on the evening news tonight, I suggest you listen carefully. Someone scoffed. Henry stood. You're bluffing. Ava didn't flinch. Then let's watch the tape. She pressed a button on the conference screen. The room went still as the audio played. The voices of Kessler and Judge Carter echoed like a knife across the boardroom. When it ended, Henry's face drained of color. One of the board members, a woman named Ellen Kim, turned to him sharply. "You told us this was handled." Kessler interjected, "This is illegally obtained material." "And yet," Ava cut in, "true." Marcus stepped forward for the first time. His voice was calm but carried weight. "You've all stood by while they ruined lives. People lost homes, pensions, futures. You can either keep covering for them or help us fix it." Henry looked between the two of them, cold fury on his face. "This is blackmail." "No," Ava said quietly. "This is justice, the kind you've hidden from for years." Silence. Then Ellen rose from her seat. "I move that we suspend both Henry Franklin and William Kessler pending an internal investigation." Another director quickly added, "Seconded." The vote happened fast, too fast for Henry to stop it. He stormed out, Kessler trailing behind him in disbelief. But just as the door shut behind them, Marcus felt his phone vibrate. He checked the screen. One message. "Backdoor leak confirmed. They know who you are." He stared at the screen for a long moment. Ava noticed the shift in his expression. "What is it?" He looked up at her, jaw clenched. "They know I'm not who I said I was." And just like that, the room's air changed again. The secret Marcus had guarded so closely was no longer safe. And whatever came next, there was no turning back. The news hit the media like a thunderclap. By noon, headlines were plastered across every major network. "Whistleblower exposes corruption at Franklin Enterprises." The video of Kessler and Judge Carter was already circulating online, dissected on podcasts, debated on morning talk shows. Social media boiled with outrage, admiration, and conspiracy theories. But one headline began to emerge alongside the others. "Who is Marcus Stone?" Ava stared at the screen in her office, jaw tight, heart pounding. The carefully built mystery around Marcus was unraveling fast. Just hours after the board vote, someone had leaked a photo of Marcus in his security uniform, right next to another one from a Forbes feature. The resemblance was impossible to deny. She picked up her phone and called him. "I know," Marcus said before she could even speak. "It's out." "How bad is it?" she asked. "I'd say, somewhere between media storm and Wall Street meltdown. My PR team's having a panic attack." "You have a PR team?" He laughed softly, but there was no joy in it. "Technically, haven't used them in years." Ava exhaled sharply. "So now what?" "Now," he said, "we stop hiding. I'll meet you at the community center in an hour. We've got a bigger problem." The community center was buzzing with reporters and locals. Ava slipped in through the back, heart pounding. Marcus was already waiting, dressed in a plain black hoodie and jeans. Nothing like the suits he'd worn in his former life. He turned as she entered. "They've frozen my accounts." "What?" "Someone in the Franklin boardroom must have called in a favor, or several. They've issued a fraud alert across my entire portfolio." "Locked me out of everything." Ava's mind raced. "They're trying to erase you. Not just me, you too." "My name gave us leverage. Now they'll say the whole case is a hoax cooked up by some disgruntled woman and a fake billionaire." He pulled out his phone and played a voicemail. "This is a warning, mister." "Stone," a cold voice said. "Walk away, or you'll both regret it. We bury people like you for fun." Ava swallowed hard. "So what's the plan? We go public, fully, names, dates, everything." "We can't win this in the shadows anymore." She nodded slowly. Let's burn it all down. Marcus met her eyes. And when it's over? When it's over, she said. I still want pancakes with you. A smile cracked through the tension. That night, Marcus and Ava sat across from each other at a small diner on the east side. No cameras, no press, just the clinking of plates and the smell of syrup and coffee. You were never just a guard, Ava said quietly, and you were never just an assistant counsel. There was a long pause. Why me, Marcus? She finally asked. He hesitated. Because you looked at me like I was someone... Not someone important, just someone who mattered. I hadn't felt that in a long time. She blinked hard, emotions rising. Before either of them could say more, a man in a suit burst through the door. Ms. Carter, Mr. Stone, you need to come with us now. Marcus rose slowly. Who sent you? The man flashed a federal badge. U.S. Marshals. There's been a warrant issued for both of you. Charges of conspiracy and fraud. Ava stood in disbelief. This is retaliation. The agent didn't flinch. I don't make the calls, I just deliver them. Marcus glanced at Ava, then back to the agent. We're not going anywhere without our lawyer. The agent smirked. You'll have plenty of time to make calls. In holding. As handcuffs clicked around their wrists, the diner fell silent. People stared. Phones came out, and just before the door closed behind them, a little girl at a nearby booth looked up at Ava and whispered, Is she in trouble, Mama? The mother held her close. No, baby. I think she's about to make history. The holding cell smelled like metal and despair. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, painting everything in a pale, ghostly hue. Ava sat on the bench, arms crossed, staring at the blank wall. Marcus paced slowly behind her, his usual calm giving way to a quiet storm brewing in his eyes. Do you really think they'll charge us? Ava asked without turning. Marcus stopped pacing. They're trying to, but they're sloppy. They move too fast. Which means they're scared. Ava looked over her shoulder. Of what? Of the truth getting out before they can control the story. We were one press conference away from cracking it wide open. Before Ava could respond, the cell door clanked open. A sharp-looking woman in a dark gray suit stepped in, heels clicking confidently on the concrete. Ava Carter? Marcus Stone? She said, flashing credentials. My name is Sandra Moss. I'm with the Office of the Inspector General. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Inspector General? Sandra nodded. We've been monitoring Franklin Enterprises for over a year. Your footage just gave us probable cause. And this little stunt, getting you arrested, well, that's obstruction. We've got everything we need now. Ava stood slowly. Then why are we still in handcuffs? Sandra's lips curved slightly. Good question. 10 minutes later, they walked out of the precinct through a back entrance. No cameras, no reporters. Sandra led them to an unmarked SUV, where a federal agent handed Ava a thick folder. These are your statements and evidence logs. We'll be submitting them to the federal court this afternoon. But you'll both need to appear tomorrow. Marcus flipped through the pages. This is everything? Sandra nodded. Plus the audio files we recovered from your phone. Your recording of Kessler threatening Ava? That's gold. Ava blinked. I didn't know it was still recording. You left it running during the board meeting. Clean audio, no breaks. And when he followed you into the hallway... Wait, Ava said. Are you saying I accidentally recorded our smoking gun? Marcus laughed under his breath. You always were thorough. Later that night, they met with journalists from 2 major outlets in a quiet conference room downtown. No flashy press conference, just facts. Ava laid out timelines. Marcus provided financial trails. The reporters asked questions, recorded everything. But just when it felt like things were finally turning, a phone rang. It was Sandra. Her voice was sharp, urgent. "They know you're talking. They're trying to shut it down. There's a court injunction on the way to block publication." "On what grounds?" Ava asked. "National security." Marcus laughed bitterly. "That's desperate. You've got 12 hours before the gag order hits. Use them." Ava ended the call and turned to Marcus. "We go live." That night, Marcus and Ava sat side by side in front of a webcam, broadcasting from an anonymous YouTube channel that had quietly gained hundreds of thousands of subscribers over the last month. They shared everything: the footage, the documents, the threats. No media spin. Just truth. It spread like wildfire. By dawn, the world knew. More importantly, the world believed. But with truth came consequence. A bomb threat was called into Ava's apartment. Marcus's building was swarmed by protesters, some in support, others not. They met in a quiet chapel downtown, a neutral ground to regroup. "You okay?" Marcus asked as she entered. Ava nodded, but her face was pale. "I can't go home." "Neither can I." They sat in silence for a long moment. "We knew it would get worse before it got better," Marcus said. "Yeah, but I didn't think it would feel this lonely." "You're not alone." She looked at him, finally letting the fear surface. "Marcus, what if we win, but lose everything else?" He reached across the table, gently taking her hand. "Then at least we lose it together." She didn't pull away. And in that moment, for the first time since this entire thing began, they both allowed themselves to hope. The hearing room inside the federal courthouse was packed. Reporters filled every row. Cameras lined the back wall. Even with the court's restrictions, the public had caught wind of what today was: a reckoning. Ava sat beside Marcus, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She wore a navy blue suit, her hair pinned neatly, her eyes locked forward with a calm that had taken months to forge. Across the aisle sat Gerald Kessler and a fleet of attorneys in tailored suits, whispering frantically among themselves. The judge entered. "Court is now in session." The prosecutor began by laying out the findings: misappropriation of funds, coercion, retaliation, obstruction of justice. He cited timestamps, played audio files, and submitted documents bearing Kessler's signature. Each revelation chipped away at the empire Kessler had used to shield himself for decades. But the turning point came when Ava took the stand. Her voice didn't shake. She spoke clearly, detailing every manipulation, every veiled threat, every time she had to swallow her dignity to protect her future. She didn't cry. She didn't plead. She simply told the truth. And truth, for once, was enough. When the defense tried to discredit her, Marcus stood. Though not called as a witness, the judge allowed it. His presence, known now to the public not as a mere security guard, but as Marcus Stone, the founder of one of the largest tech ventures in the country, shifted the energy in the room instantly. "I chose to walk through this world invisible," Marcus said, his voice steady. "Because I needed to see who people became when they thought I was no one. Gerald Kessler showed me exactly that." The courtroom went silent. When the verdict was announced, Ava didn't even smile. Kessler was found guilty on all charges. The sentencing would come later, but the judge ordered immediate remand. Kessler's eyes flickered in disbelief as the bailiff handcuffed him. Outside the courthouse, the sky was overcast, but the crowd was bright. Cheers erupted as Ava and Marcus stepped down the marble steps, cameras flashing, people holding handmade signs. Thank you for standing up. You gave us hope. You proved they can't hide forever. A young woman approached Ava, eyes glassy. I watched your video. I'm going through something similar at my job. You gave me the courage to speak up. Ava squeezed her hand. Then don't stop. Don't ever let them silence you. Later that evening, back at the small rooftop garden, where everything had once felt impossible, Ava and Marcus sat under the twinkle of city lights. She held a glass of wine, swirling it absent-mindedly. It still doesn't feel real. It's real, Marcus said, his voice low. They tried to bury you. You bloomed anyway. She smiled faintly, then turned serious. What now? He looked out at the skyline. Now, we build something better, a company. A platform. A place where people like you, like us, can't be ignored anymore. And us? She asked softly. He looked at her then, eyes warm. We started as strangers, then allies, then something more. I don't know what tomorrow holds, Ava, but I do know I want to face it with you. She leaned her head on his shoulder, quiet for a beat. Me too. The camera zoomed out as the two sat in silence, wrapped in the glow of justice finally served, not just in court, but in their hearts. Sometimes power isn't in the name you carry or the wealth you hide. Sometimes it's in the courage to be seen for who you really are and to fight for others who haven't yet found their voice. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you believe in second chances and unseen strength, share it. Like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Because the world needs more stories where the right people win. Let's keep telling them together.